Commander Vexter of the Andorian fleet, had witnessed approximately 372 weapon demonstrations during his tenure on the Galactic Defense Coalition's Armament Review Board. He considered himself and GT music and GT quite reasonably an expert on destructive technology, plasma rifles, elegant graviton disruptors, magnificent molecular destabilizer, chef's kiss, if he had lips capable of such a gesture. So when the human engineer walked into the testing chamber carrying what appeared to be a sharpened piece of scrap metal attached to a wooden stick, and GT music and GT, Vexter experienced something his species rarely felt: second-hand embarrassment. Esteemed council members, the human woman said, her voice steady despite the music, barely concealed snickering rippling through the observation deck. My name is Kira Vance, and I'm here to present a weapon system that has served humanity for over 10,000 years. She held music up the object. It looked like something a child might craft in a remedial metalworking class. The blade, if one could call it that, was roughly wedge-shaped, attached to a handle that appeared to be carved from actual tree matter, not synthetic composite, not nano-enhanced polymer, actual dead plant fiber. Counselor Rithzin and GT music and GT, a Paluvian whose species had mastered energy weapons before humans discovered fire, let out a whistling laugh music through his breathing slits. Is this a joke? Did the humans send us a comedian instead of an engineer? Kira's expression didn't change. Vexter found music that mildly interesting. Most species, when mocked by a Paluvian, showed some physiological stress response. Humans, apparently music, just stood there with that unsettling stillness they were known for. This, Kira continued, rotating the primitive weapon in her hands, is called a throwing axe. Before you dismiss music it entirely, I'd like to request a simple demonstration. By all means, Vexter said, music gesturing with his primary manipulator appendage. Might as well let this play out. Entertainment value alone would make the requisition music forms worthwhile. Tech Officer Mern, please activate a standard target drone. Standard, sir. Mern's antennae twitched with what Vex Taller recognized as confusion for a thrown projectile. Music. Shouldn't we use something more appropriate? Perhaps a stationary gel block. Music. Standard drone. Vex Taller repeated, let the humans learn this lesson quickly. Their species had only joined the coalition. Music. 6 months ago, they needed to understand that the galaxy operated on a different technological level than their quaint little planet. The target drone materialized in the testing range, hovering 3 m off the ground. It was equipped with Class C deflector shields, the same kind used on reconnaissance vehicles. Overkill for a chunk of metal, certainly, but regulations were regulations. Kira stepped up to the firing line. That ridiculous weapon held loosely music in her right hand. She was small by human standards. Vex Taller noted from her file, approximately 163 cm, 62 kg. Her species averaged larger, which meant she was either young or simply built on a lighter frame. Whenever you're ready, Engineer Vance, Vex Taller said, settling back into his observation chair. This would take approximately 4 seconds, 3 for her to throw the primitive tool, 1 for it to bounce harmlessly off the shield, and Then they could move on to actual weapon systems. Kira's music arm moved. That's the only way Vex Taller could describe it later in his incident. Report: her arm simply moved. There was no wind music, up no elaborate throwing motion like you'd seen in human recreational activities. One moment the axe was in her hand, the next it was a blur crossing the 30 m distance to the drone. The sound came first, a sharp crack that made every being in the observation deck flinch. Then came the visual, the drone's shield flickering, music sputtering and collapsing entirely as the axe punched through it. Like it was decorative tissue paper, the blade buried music itself in the drone's central processor with a meaty thunk that seemed impossibly loud in the suddenly silent chamber. Music. The drone fell from the air, sparking and dead. Kira turned back to face the observation deck, her music expression still neutral. Questions. Vex Tailler's 3 hearts were doing something rhythmic and uncomfortable in his chest cavity. That shield could withstand sustained pulse rifle fire for 90 seconds. It could deflect micro missile it had in previous tests. Laughed music in the face of shaped charges. It had not survived 4/10 of a second against a sharp rock on a stick thrown by a small music human female. Counselor Raxon had stopped whistling. Vex Tailler's memory cores replayed the scene from 6 months prior with perfect clarity, which was at this particular moment unfortunate. He would have preferred a music faulty recollection. The human delegation had arrived at coalition headquarters aboard a vessel that barely qualified music as faster than light capable. It limped into dock like a wounded sandcrawler, burning fuel inefficiently and broad casting music radio signals that any competent military force could intercept. From 3 star systems away, the Andorian High Command had immediately classified humanity as Category 7, technologically inferior, strategically negligible, potentially useful as a buffer zone. We wish to contribute to the coalition's defense initiatives. The human ambassador had announced. His name was Gerald Music Chen, and he had the audacity to smile while saying it, as if offering primitive assistance to a multi-species alliance that had been defending the galaxy for 4,000 years. Vex Tailler had reviewed their weapons catalog with growing amusement. Kinetic firearms that required chemical propellants, explosive device that needed physical detonation, missiles that flew in predictable arcs. It was like watching a species try to fight a forest fire with music, spit, and determination. Your conventional armaments are, how should I phrase this, diplomatically outdated by approximately 2,000 years, Vex Tailler had explained during the initial assessment meeting. We appreciate your enthusiasm, music, but the coalition faces threats that your projectile weapons simply cannot address. Music. The Krill swarm uses adaptive bioarmor. The synthetic Concordat employs phase-shifting assault music units. Your bullets would be, and I mean this with utmost respect, completely useless. Gerald Chen had nodded, still smiling. That unsettling human smile. Music. We understand, however, we'd like to propose something unconventional, more unconventional than chemical music. Explosives, Counselor Ratson had muttered. We'd like to demonstrate some of our historical weapon systems. Chen continued. Music. Ignoring the comment, tools and armaments that predate our modern military by centuries, sometimes millennia, the silence in the chamber had been profound. You music want, Vexter said slowly, ensuring his translator was functioning correctly, to show us weapons that are outdated even by your own primitive music standards. Precisely, why in the name of the first stars would we waste coalition resources evaluating weapons your own species abandoned? Chin's smile had widened. Because we didn't abandon them due to ineffectiveness, Commander. We music abandoned them because we found more efficient ways to kill each other from greater distances. But efficiency and effectiveness aren't always the same thing. Our historical weapons music have one advantage your energy-based systems lack. And what advantage would that be? Their kinetic, pure, simple physical music force, no energy signature to detect, no emissions to track, no power source to drain, just mass, velocity, and several music 1,000 years of refined technique. Vexter had authorized the demonstration request mostly out of morbid curiosity. The paperwork alone would be comedy material for months. Testing Stone A technology in a facility designed to evaluate weapons capable of cracking planets. Absurd, entertaining, but music absurd. He had expected primitive spears, maybe some archaic bladed weapons, something quaint to photograph for the Coalition archives under the category of galactic music oddities. He had not expected Kira Vance and her ancestors' nightmare on a stick to demolish a military-grade shield like it was made of wishful thinking and music prayer. His past self had been an idiot. The observation deck remained frozen in what Vexter could only describe as collective stupefaction. 17 different species representing the Coalition's finest military minds stared at the sparking remains of the target drone with expressions ranging from disbelief to existential crisis. Tech Officer Mern broke the silence first, his antennae rigid with confusion. Commander, the music shield integrity readings must be malfunctioning. There's no possible way a non-powered projectile achieved music penetration velocity sufficient to overcome Class C deflector technology. And GT music and GT run a diagnostic. Vexter ordered, his voice coming out rougher than intended. His translator chip was probably malfunctioning too, because music. Surely he hadn't just witnessed what his visual receptors insisted had occurred. Down in the testing music range, Kira walked calmly to the fallen drone and pulled her axe free with a casual yank. That suggested she'd done this approximately 10,000 music times before. She examined the blade, wiped something off it with her thumb, and returned to the firing line. Diagnostic music complete, sir, Mern announced, his tone suggesting he wished the diagnostic had been incomplete. All sensors functioned within normal parameters. The shield was operating at full music strength when it failed. Counselor Rothson's breathing slits fluttered rapidly, a Peluvian stress indicator. Impossible. The kinetic energy required to breach that shield music would demand velocities approaching .003 light speed. No biological organism can generate that kind of force through muscle contraction alone. Perhaps it's the metal composition, offered Counselor Tilmara, a crystalline being whose species communicated music primarily through light refraction. Her surface flickered nervously, some unknown earth alloy with exotic properties. Vexter activated the Music analysis scanner targeting the axe in Kira's hand. The results appeared on his screen instantly. Music. Iron, carbon, chromium, standard steel. Composition, nothing exotic, nothing special, just sharpened metal that had somehow decided to violate several fundamental laws of physics. And GT, Engineer Vance. And GT, Vexter activated the communication channel, proud that his voice only trembled slightly. Would you mind explaining what just happened? Kira looked up at the observation deck, shielding her eyes from the testing range's overhead illumination. I threw my axe, it hit the target. Was the demonstration unclear? Several council members made choking sounds. The demonstration was perhaps too clear. Vexter replied, what I meant was, how did a primitive throwing weapon penetrate military-grade shielding? Oh, that. Kira hefted the axe. And GT, music. And GT, spinning it casually in her grip. Council members nearest the observation window flinched backward. Music. Your shields are designed to dissipate energy over a wide surface area, right? Spread the impact, reduce music, the force per square centimeter. Correct, Morn said, his voice academic despite music, his obvious distress. Standard deflection physics, energy distribution. Music reduces penetration capability. Right, but my axe doesn't care about your energy distribution. Kira pointed to the blade's edge. This focuses all the kinetic energy into a surface area of approximately and GT, music. And GT, 0.5 square centimeters. Your shield tried to spread the impact, but there wasn't music enough surface area to spread it. 2. The force per centimeter ratio exceeded your shield's dispersion threshold, so it punched through. She said this like she was explaining basic mathematics to younglings, but the velocity, Tilmora music, protested her crystalline structure pulsing with agitated colors. The required velocity to generate sufficient music force, no biological being should be capable of that. Kira's mouth quirked upward. Music, in what Vexthor had learned, was a human smile. It looked predatory. You'd be surprised, music, what humans are capable of. Counselor, we evolved on a planet with 1.3 times galactic standard music gravity. Our muscle density is approximately 40% higher than most spacefaring music species. What feels like a casual throw to me generates force that your shields weren't programmed to anticipate. One throw could be a fluke. Counselor, music, Rathsin said, his whistling voice regaining some of its earlier condescension. Coincidence, music. Favorable angles, shield malfunction. Despite the diagnostics, I propose music, we test again with multiple shield configurations. Happy to oblige, Kira said cheerfully. And GT, music. And GT, Tech Officer Mern deployed 3 more drones, each equipped with different shielding types. Class C deflector like before, Class B military-grade barrier, and a Class A personal defense shield, typically reserved for high-value targets. The drones arranged themselves at varying distances, 20 m, 40 m, and 60 m. All 3 targets are active and shielded. Commander, music, Mern reported, his antennae were drooping. Now a sign of resignation. Proceed when ready. Engineer Vance, Vexthor said, leaning forward in his observation chair. Despite himself, Kira didn't music even stretch or warm up. She simply drew her arm back and threw. The axe spun through the air with a whistling sound that seemed somehow reproachful, music, as if the weapon itself was annoyed at being doubted. It struck the nearest drone's Class C shield, punched through, like the shield was a polite suggestion rather than a barrier, and continued spinning. The blade severed the drone's stabilizer, causing it to lurch sideways directly into music, the path of the second drone. They collided with a spectacular crunch of metal and sparking circuitry. The axe, undeterred music by this mechanical carnage, ricocheted off the wreckage at an angle that seemed mathematically improbable and struck the third music drone's Class A shield. There was a flash as the shield overloaded, trying to compensate for the concentrated music. Kinetic impact then failed completely. The axe embedded itself in music, the drone's central core. All three drones fell to the testing range floor in a heap of smoking technology and shattered assumptions. Music. Kira walked over, stepped on one drone for leverage, and yanked her axe free. She looked music up at the observation deck and shrugged. Nobody laughed this time. Vexter authorized an emergency technical analysis team to enter the testing range before Kira had even returned to the observation deck. 6 specialists in various fields of weapons technology descended on the wreckage like scavengers on a fresh carcass, scanners humming, data tablets recording every microscopic detail. Lead physicist Dr. Kwang Tara Vorshian, whose species had invented energy shielding technology 1,800 years ago, examined the penetration points with 4 of his 7 music eye stalks, while the remaining 3 swiveled nervously. This is, forgive my language, completely unacceptable. According to every established principle of defense, the physics, show me the calculations, Vexter Music demanded, pulling up the data stream on his command tablet. The numbers appeared. And GT, music. And GT, and they made his 3 hearts sink in his chest cavity. The axe had been traveling at approximately 47 ms when it impacted the first shield. That velocity should have been laughable. Plasma bolts traveled at light speed. Graviton pulses warped space-time itself. 47 ms was slower than most atmospheric transit vehicles. The velocity is irrelevant when the mass concentration is this extreme, Dr. Kwang Tar explained music, highlighting a 3-dimensional model of the impact. Look at the force distribution, the entire kinetic energy of the throw, which admittedly is substantial given human muscle density, focuses into an edge measuring 0.48 cm wide. Shield's energy matrix attempts to disperse the impact, but it's designed for wide area effects, explosions, energy beams, things with music dispersion patterns. This weapon is the opposite of dispersed. It's concentrated. Malice with an edge. Counselor Tilmer's crystalline surface had shifted to a murky brown color, indicating deep confusion. But our shields have withstood concentrated beam weapons before. Laser cutters, plasma torches, molecular disruptors, all of those focus energy into narrow music points. Those emit energy signatures that shields can detect and compensate for milliseconds. Before impact, Dr. Quelter countered, his eye stalks music waving in agitation. This primitive weapon has no energy signature, no electromagnetic emissions, no thermal music bloom. Nothing, the shield's predictive. Algorithms never engaged because there was nothing to predict. Music by the time the physical mass registered on sensors, it was already punching through the barrier. That's ridiculous music. Counselor Rethzen wheezed, his breathing slits working overtime. Are you suggesting that our music, defensive technology, refined over millennia, is vulnerable to sharpened metal thrown by hand? I'm not jesting it, counselor. I'm reading music it directly from the impact. Forensics. Dexter rubbed his temples with his secondary manipulator appendages, a headache forming behind his ocular implants. And GT, what about the ricochet shot? And GT, the one that took out all 3 drones. Don't even get me started on the ricochet shot. Dr. Quelter music muttered, pulling up another data stream. The angle calculations alone violate 6 music principles of momentum conservation. She somehow imparted spin to the weapon that allowed it to maintain angular momentum through the collision, redirect off the wreckage at a 73 degrees angle, and still retain sufficient velocity to ford a Class A shield. Music. Do you understand how much 3-dimensional spatial awareness that requires? The human brain processed trajectory, mass, velocity, collision dynamics, and secondary impact vectors. Music in approximately 0.8 seconds. Maybe she got lucky, someone suggested weakly from the back of the observation deck. Twice, Dr. Quelter's eye stalks swiveled to fix the speaker with a withering stare. She got lucky twice in a row with completely different shield configurations and drone positions. Vex Tor made a decision. He suspected music he would regret. Bring her back. I want another demonstration, Commander. Music. With respect, how many more drones do you want destroyed? Mern asked. And GT, all of them if necessary. And GT, set up 10 targets this time, varying distances, different shield types, randomized positions. If this human can replicate these results against multiple targets under controlled variables, music, then we need to completely recalibrate our understanding of kinetic warfare. And if she can't replicate the results, and GT, Tilmara asked hopefully. And GT, Vex Tor looked down at the testing range, where Kira stood examining her axe blade. Music, running her thumb along the edge with casual familiarity. Then we'll know the first demonstration was an anomaly. And GT, file a curious incident report and move on with our lives. And GT, he didn't believe that for a music second, and judging by the expressions on the council members' faces, neither did they. And GT, Dr. Quempter began deploying additional target drones, muttering calculations under his breath about muscle fiber density, music, and primitive violence. Vex Tor suspected the physicist's entire worldview was currently experiencing music, catastrophic structural failure. He could relate. The galaxy had seemed so much music simpler 3 hours ago, before humanity decided to weaponize basic physics and ruin everyone's day. And GT, music. And GT, 10 target drones materialized in the testing range, arranged in a configuration that Dr. Quempter assured everyone was scientifically music randomized. 3 hovered at standard height, 4 were positioned near the Ceiling supports 2 hugged the floor, and 1 music sat dead center at. Maximum range 90 m from the firing line. And GT, this is excessive, Kira music observed. Returning to her position, I only brought 1 axe. And GT, you won't need music more than 1. Vextor said, suspecting he was about to regret this entire military career. Demonstrate your maximum capability. Engineer Vance, show us what this music weapon system can actually do. Kira tilted her head, considering the layout. And GT, music. And GT, then she smiled, that predatory human. Smile again, you want maximum capability, all right, don't blink. She threw. The axe hit the nearest drone, carving through its Class B shield like the barrier music had personally offended it, but instead of embedding in the machinery, the blade caught the drone's edge at music, an angle. Redirecting upward, the weapon spun toward the ceiling support beam, which was constructed from reinforced titanium composite rated to hold 6,000 kg. The axe severed it, the beam groaned, sagged, and collapsed onto 2 of the elevated drones, crushing them like discarded music beverage containers. The axe ricocheted off the falling beam, angled downward, and punctured a floor-level drone before bouncing horizontally toward the far wall, where it struck the reinforced barrier plating. Music, the barrier designed to contain explosive detonations up to Class 5 yield, developed music crack that spiderwebbed outward with a sound like breaking ice. The axe rebounded again, now traveling parallel to the ground music, and took out another drone at knee height before finally embedding itself in the center range target with a decisive thunk. Silence filled the observation deck like a physical presence. 6 drones destroyed, 1 support beam severed, barrier plating compromised, 1 axe, 1 throw. Music, sweet merciful stars, Mern whispered, his antennae lying completely flat against his head in submission. Counselor, music, wrath, isn't made of sound like air escaping from a punctured seal. That's not music possible. That's not, that can't. The angles alone, the force retention through multiple impacts. Music, this violates this. I need to sit down. He was already sitting down. Emergency meeting, Vextor announced, music, his voice sounding distant to his own auditory receptors. All council members. Music. Conference room 7 immediately. Dr. Quamenter, I want a full physics report on my desk in 1 hour. Music, explaining how any of what we just witnessed is possible. Commander, I'm not sure I can. The physicist protested weakly. Then explain why it's impossible in a way that music accounts for the 6 destroyed drones currently sparking on the testing range floor. Vextor, music activated his communicator to the Coalition's military command. This is Commander Vextor, music. Authorization code 97 Echo Delta. I need an immediate tactical assessment team. Assembled. Priority classification. Critical. Nature of the threat. Music. Commander, the response came. Vextor. Watch Kira walk across the testing range, step over wreckage, and retrieve her axe from the final music drone. She checked the blade for damage, seemed satisfied, and tucked it into a loop on her belt like she just finished a routine music equipment check. The threat, Vextor said slowly, is that we've been designing our defensive systems under music fundamentally flawed assumptions for approximately 4,000 years, and a human just proved it, using a weapon her species invented, before they discovered metal working. Pause on the other end. Sir, could you repeat that? You heard me correctly. Assemble the team, we have a lot of security protocols to reconsider. Down. In music, the testing range. Kira looked up at the observation deck and gave a small wave. Vexter's 3 hearts were doing something arrhythmic and deeply concerning. The emergency meeting was going to be a nightmare. Conference room 7 had never felt so small, despite being music designed to accommodate 47 different species. Comfortably, Vexter stood at the head of the tactical display table while Dr. Clementer projected three-dimensional models of human musculature that looked frankly terrifying when rendered at scale. Let me ensure I understand this correctly. NGT, music. NGT, Counselor Tilmara said, her crystalline structure flickering between confused purple and alarmed orange. Humans are physically stronger than 83% of known spacefaring species. Music, and we classified them as Category 7. Minimal threat in our defense. Offered weakly, they're smaller than most military-capable species. Their average height is only 1.7 m. We assumed, quite reasonably I thought, that smaller meant weaker. Dr. Music Quainter made a derisive sound through his breathing apparatus. That assumption ignores planetary evolution entirely. Earth's gravity is 1.3 times galactic music standard. Every single human evolved under constant pressure. That would exhaust most of us within music hours. Their bones are denser. Their muscle fibers are compacted. Their cardiovascular systems pump harder just to music maintain basic function. He highlighted a cross-section of human muscle tissue next to Mondorian tissue. The difference was startling. NGT, music. NGT, where Vexter species had elegantly elongated muscle fibers optimized for efficiency. Human muscles looked like tightly wound cables layered over each other in redundant music systems. They're built like biological equipment. Dr. Quainter continued. Look at the skeletal structure. Their bones can withstand music impacts that would shatter most species' frames. Their joints are reinforced with cartilage and connective tissue that functions like natural shock absorbers. And music, here's the part that should concern everyone, they don't even realize how strong they are relative to galactic norms, because on their own world their average. Counselor Music Ratson had regained some composure, though his breathing slits still fluttered nervously. Music. What about fatigue? Surely maintaining that muscle density requires enormous energy. Music expenditure. They must tire quickly. Actually, no, Dr. Quainter pulled up metabolic comparison charts. Human endurance is frankly absurd. Their ancestors hunted prey by literally chasing animals until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They call it persistence hunting. Some humans can run for hours, even days, without stopping. Their cooling system, the sweating mechanism, is remarkably efficient at heat dispersion. Vexter felt something cold. Music settling in his primary stomach, so when Engineer Vance threw that axe multiple times without visible fatigue, she was barely exerting herself. By human standards, music. I reviewed her physiological readings. During the demonstration, her heart rate increased by 12%, 12, a Paluvian performing equivalent exertion would show increases of 60 to 70%. The room. Music fell silent except for the hum of the projection system. There's more, Dr. Kumter added, because apparently the galaxy needed additional reasons for concern. Human spatial awareness and hand-eye coordination evolved music from their arboreal ancestors, tree-dwelling creatures that needed to calculate three-dimensional trajectories. Music, while swinging between branches, they can track multiple moving objects, simultaneously predict intersection points and adjust their throws mid-motion using something called proprioception. That ricochet shot that destroyed 3 drones, she calculated that trajectory instinctively. Music, probably in under a second. Instinctively, Vexter repeated flatly. Their brains are wired for kinetic problem-solving. Music. Throw rock, hit target, eat dinner. Millions of years of evolutionary programming. Music. Counselor Tilmara shifted to pale yellow, indicating resigned acceptance. So what you're telling us is that humans are dense-boned. Music. High-endurance, precision targeting. Biological weapons platforms that evolved under extreme gravity, and we invited them to join the coalition, thinking they needed our protection. That's an accurate summary, yes, Vexter. The conference table at the assembled military leadership of the Galactic Defense Coalition. Music. Every face, regardless of species, wore the same expression, the dawning realization that perhaps, just perhaps, they had fundamentally misunderstood what humanity was bringing to this alliance. I want music, full combat trials, Vexter announced. If one human with one primitive weapon can devastate our defensive systems, I need to know what happens when they encounter music. Actual combat scenarios. Are you certain? That's wise, Commander. Myrn asked quietly. Vexter thought about Kira's casual wave after destroying 6 drones and compromising their testing facility. Structural integrity. Wise. Absolutely not necessary. Without question, the formal request took 30 minutes to draft and required signatures from 7 different department heads, which Vexter considered a new personal record for military bureaucracy. The message transmitted to Kira's temporary quarters was deliberately professional, carefully worded to avoid any suggestion that the entire coalition military command was experiencing collective panic. Music. Her response arrived 4 minutes later. Sure sounds fun. When sounds fun, the human thought combat trials against military-grade attack drones sounded fun. Vexter was beginning to understand music. Why Earth's history files were 70% warfare. The combat simulation arena occupied Sublevel 9 of the Coalition headquarters, a massive cylindrical space designed to replicate battlefield conditions, 40 m in diameter, 15 m high, with variable terrain generators, music, and environmental controls that could simulate everything from frozen wastelands to volcanic hellscapes. Standard combat drone configuration. Tech Officer Myrn asked, pulling up the arena. Music control interface. Negative, Vexter decided. Use the Mark 7 hunter killers, the ones we deploy against Cathar swarm infiltrators. Music. Every head in the control room turned toward him. Commander, those are designed to eliminate heavily armored targets, Doctor. Music. Cathar protested. They're equipped with plasma cutters and kinetic dampeners against an unarmed human with a hand weapon. That's not a test, that's an execution. Music Engineer Vance. Destroyed 6 shielded drones and structural supports with 1 throw. Vexter countered, I think she can handle it. Besides, we need realistic music data. If humans are going to integrate into coalition forces, we need to know their combat limitations, not just their party tricks. Down in the preparation area, Kira was stretching, rolling her shoulders and neck with movements music that produced audible, popping sounds that made several observers wince. She'd changed into what she called music tactical gear fit. Black clothing that apparently provided zero protection but allowed full range of motion. She carried 3 throwing axes now, secured in loops across her back. 3 axes. Counselor Rathson. Music observed from the viewing gallery. She brought 3 axes to fight. Automated killing machines. Want to place music, a wager on the outcome? Counselor Tilmara asked, her crystalline structure flickering with what might have been amusement. That's highly inappropriate for military officials. Rathson replied primly, I'll put 50 credits on the human lasting under 2 minutes. Someone called from the back of the gallery, 70 credits says she doesn't land a single hit. Another voice added. Rhythm's breathing slits fluttered. And GT, music. And GT, 100 credits says she destroys at least 2 drones before tactical withdrawal. So much for inappropriate. Dexter ignored music, the growing betting pool, and focused on the arena setup. The terrain generator had created a landscape of broken pillars, debris fields, and elevated platforms. And GT, music. And GT, cover options, vertical advantages, choke points of proper combat environment. 5 Mark 700 killers materialized at strategic positions around the arena. Each one was twice Kira's size, equipped with articulated limbs for rapid movement, targeting, sensors capable of tracking objects moving at supersonic speeds. And GT, music. And GT, and enough weaponry to reduce a light vehicle to constituent atoms. And GT, Engineer Vance, can you hear me? And GT, Dexter. Music activated the communication channel, loud and clear. Commander. Kira drew 1 axe from her back. Music tested its weight. So, what are the rules? Survive a certain duration, destroy all targets. And GT, music. And GT, try not to damage your expensive equipment too badly. That last question was delivered with a tone that suggested she was music joking. Dexter suspected she was not joking at all. Eliminate all hostiles or survive for 5 minutes. Whichever music comes first. Got it. Should I wait for a countdown or something? Simulation begins in 10 seconds. 9-8. Kira settled into a stance that looked deceptively music, relaxed. 3, 2, 1, begin. The hunter-killers activated with synchronized precision their targeting sensors immediately. Music locking onto the lone human standing in the open. Then things got interesting. The first hunter-killer launched itself music from an elevated platform, plasma cutter already charging with a high-pitched whine that meant imminent death for most organic beings. It covered 12 m in under a second. Limbs articulated for maximum striking efficiency. Kira threw her axe sidearm. The weapon spun horizontally through the air, struck the drone's central sensor cluster, and punched clean through the reinforced casing. The hunter-killers momentum carried it forward another 3 m. before its systems registered catastrophic failure and it crashed into the music arena floor, sparking and twitching. Kira was already moving. She sprinted toward the fallen drone, not away from the remaining 4 targets, which Vexter's tactical training music insisted was completely backward. Running toward threats violated every survival protocol in the Coalition military handbook. 2 more hunter killers converged on her position from opposite angles, a pincer movement designed to eliminate escape vectors. Their targeting computers calculated intercept points, adjusted for human running speed, and prepared to fire. Kira actually slid, dropping to the ground and using her momentum to skid beneath the first drone's plasma burst, which sizzled through the space where her torso had been 0.3 seconds earlier. She grabbed her embedded axe as she passed the disabled drone, yanked it free without breaking stride, and came up, throwing in one fluid motion. The axe caught the second hunter-killer mid-flight, shearing through its primary music limb articulation. The drone listed sideways, compensated with its remaining limbs, and attempted to reacquire targeting lock. Kira had already drawn her second axe. This throw was different. Overhand with her full body rotation behind it, the axe tumbled music through the air end over end and struck the damaged hunter-killer with enough force to send it careening into a support music pillar. The collision destroyed both the drone and part of the pillar, which collapsed and created a debris music cloud that obscured the arena sensors. I can't get a clear reading, Merm reported, music frantically adjusting scanners. The dust is interfering with thermal tracking through the observation window. That Stilfer could barely make out movement in the swirling debris. Remaining 3 hunter-killers had spread out music, using their sensors to penetrate the obscurement. Their programming adapted to the environmental change, switching to motion detection, music, and predictive algorithms. Something flew out of the dust cloud. Not an axe, a piece of broken music pillar, roughly the size of a human head. All 3 hunter-killers tracked it, their targeting systems identifying it as a potential threat. Kira emerged from a completely different angle, her third axe already in motion. The weapon struck the nearest drone's music power core, and the resulting explosion created a chain reaction that damaged the 4th hunter-killer stabilization system. It wobbled, attempted to compensate, and crashed into the arena wall hard enough to leave music an impact crater. 4 down, 1 remaining. The final hunter-killer had learned. It retreated to maximum range, putting distance between itself and the terrifying human who treated combat drones like target practice. Its plasma cutter charged to full power, preparing music for a sustained barrage that would overwhelm any attempted evasion. Kira had no axes left. Music. They were embedded in destroyed drones, scattered across the arena. She picked up another piece of music debris, jagged chunk of the broken pillar, and hurled it like a discus. Hunter-killers' defensive protocols engaged, firing a plasma burst that vaporized the incoming projectile, which was exactly what Kira wanted. She'd already closed half the distance while the drone was distracted, music sprinting with a speed that made Vexter's own species look positively sedentary. The hunter-killer reacquired targeting lock, adjusted aim began firing. Kira dodged, not with any fancy Acrobatics just sharp directional. Changes that put her consistently 0.2 seconds ahead of the drone's predictive. Algorithms, left, right, forward roll. Lateral jump, the plasma burst scorched. The ground where she'd been, never. She was. She reached the first destroyed. Drone grabbed her axe, spun and threw. In one continuous motion, the final. Hunter-killer had no time to process the threat. Music. The axe struck its central processor at an angle that suggested Kira had calculated the precise trajectory while actively dodging plasma fire. The drone died. Mid-targeting sequence, silence filled the arena. Music, except for the crackling of electrical fires and the sound of Kira breathing heavily. She'd survived. No. And GT, music. And GT. Vexter corrected himself. She dominated. The timer read 1 minute and 47 seconds. Music in the viewing gallery. Nobody moved to collect their betting winnings. Vexter spent 3 hours rewriting his official assessment report, deleting phrases like music, technologically inferior and negligible strategic value, and replacing them with terminology that wouldn't make him look like a complete music fool to coalition high command. The final report read, humanity represents an unconventional but highly effective military asset. Recommendation, immediate integration into special operations units. Secondary recommendation, comprehensive review of all defensive systems with focus on kinetic vulnerability assessment. He paused, considered his career longevity, and added tertiary recommendation. Never, under any circumstances, underestimate human capability. Music based on perceived technological simplicity. The response from high command arrived. Music within 6 hours, which was approximately 5 hours and 30 minutes faster than usual. Apparently, someone music important had watched the arena footage. Human historical weapon systems were approved for coalition music use effective immediately. Furthermore, and this was the part that made Vexthal question reality itself. And GT, music. And GT, 17 different species had submitted formal requests for human combat instruction programs. 17. The Polovians, who'd invented energy weapons before humans discovered agriculture, wanted to learn how to throw axes. Kira took the news with characteristic human casualness. Sure, music can teach, fair warning. Though most species don't have the muscle density for proper technique, we'll need to develop modified throwing styles for different physiologies. You've already considered training adaptations for alien species, Vexthal said, not quite making it a question. Commander, I'm an engineer. I adapt systems for different operational parameters. Music. People are just complicated systems. She grinned. Besides, this is going to be hilarious. I can't wait to teach Crystalline how to throw something without shattering their own appendages. Her official title became Combat Systems Instructor, Kinetic Warfare Division. Her unofficial title, whispered through coalition military channels, music with equal parts respect and terror, was the human who broke physics with a sharpened stick. And GT, music. And GT. 6 months later, Vexthal watched a mixed species combat unit deploy into a hostile zone carrying music, combination of plasma rifles and absurdly throwing axes. The unit Designation Vance's Irregulars, they had a 93% mission success rate. Humanity had been in the coalition for 1 year, and they'd already revolutionized warfare by music, reaching 4,000 years backward into their own violent history. Vexthal were updated his personal log with a single sentence note to self: when humans music offer to help, never assume you understand what help means. In the training facility below, Kira was teaching a Polovian music how to grip an axe handle properly. The galaxy, Vexthal reflected, was becoming a much more interesting and music terrifying place. He wouldn't have it any other way.